So today's daf is daf tesvav. Umaktiro bekli sharis. Kli sharis maktirle. Did the brisa intend that he actually puts the kli sharis on the mizbeach and it goes up in flame? If we take the brisa literally, ela ema, but rather we have to change the brisa a little bit. Maleu bekli sharis lehaktiro. So it's only that he brings the kli sharis in order to be maktir the komets, but he's not going to be maktir the komets inside the kli sharis. So he doesn't apply fire to the kli sharis, but rather he places the kli sharis with the komets on the mizbeach, and then he burns the komets. So he brings the komets onto the mizbeach in a kli sharis. He pours from the kli sharis onto the eish hamizbeach. Umolcho. Now he has to put salt into this kli sharis. So no sal gabi before he pours the contents of the kli sharis onto the fire. So this is how the requirement of melach, which applies in all korbanos, specifically applies to a mincha, as the Torah states. Korav hakometz shiareo nechol. The aktoras haktores is matir the shirayim for achilas kohen. Minoan. The chsiv. Now we're back to Vayikra Beis. V'iktir hakohenes azkarasa. Azkarasa means the komets. Uksiv. And in the very next pasuk it says, "Vano seres min amincha li'aronul banav." The remainder of the mincha, that's called shiarei mincha, is designated for Aaron Ubanav for achilas kohen. The Gemara adds karav hakometz. Now, at what moment in time is the Torah of the komets achieved, and the heter for achilas kohanim is therefore a result? Here we have a machlokas in the Gemara itself. The markidis, the markidis. Titma. Hakometz meisa mater shirai b'achila. When is the Torah of the komets complete, such that it now generates a permission to eat the shiarei mincha? Rabbi Chanina mevisha tislabar. As soon as he attaches the fire and it catches on to the very tip of the mincha. Rabbi Yochanan Amari disagrees. Rabbi Chanina, you were makel too much. We should need mishet ha'or berubo, when most of the komets is already ignited. And this is a sugya menachos on daf chof vav. The brisa says, "V'asham hakodim litei litocho yayin v'shemen udvash." The shiarei mincha are eaten by the kohanim with wine, with oil, and honey. My taima, amakro l'mashcha. And what does it mean when the pasuk says in Bamidbar Perek Yudches l'mashcha ligdula? Mashcha means ligdula, and it means it's eaten the way kings would eat it. Kederech shamalachim ochlu. And obviously the malachim, are going to eat in a kingly fashion. And the word l'mashcha means like meshicha, like when a king ascends the throne, he's anointed as king. And this is the way karbanos have to be eaten like kings. And kings will eat not just plain wheat that was burnt on the mizbeach, but they would add condiments. Well, actually, we're talking about the shirayim. I think it's the Netziv Mivaloshin who says, why do we wear a kittel on the night of Pesach? He says, because that's a kiyum of Lemashcha, and it's Zeichel Korban Pesach. They used to wear special b'gadim, white clothes, when they ate the karbanos. The ein asurim elamila chametz. Okay, they can eat the shirayim, ligdula, l'mashal ligdula, with yayin, shemen, and dvash, but not chametz. Tichsiv lo seyofech chametz chelkam. Even their chelek, the Torah says, should not be eaten chametz. It's interesting that in the world of kodshim, chametz is always considered like a pagam, something, a kilkel. It's only like inferior, which probably means that before it's fully baked, every chametz has a point in which it's kind of sour. Amar Reb Shimon Lakish, afilu chelkam lo te'ofech chametz. This pasuk is adding the word chelkam, even referring to the shiari mincha eaten by the kohanim. It's not allowed to be chametz. Now we said that all the menachos require what? Shemen and levona. Frek the Gemara, that's not really true. We have a minchas chote. Kol menachos tuno shemen u'levona va'ikar minchas chote. So we're talking about any one of three chatoim. Either he's kofer, he was makrish, a taina against him, and he took a shvua to that effect, so it's a shvua sheker, or he was tameh and he entered into the migdash, or somebody demanded testimony from him and he denied under oath that he had testimony. In all these chatos, he's got to bring a seh, nekeva, or a gedi, and it matters not what his financial status is. I'm sorry. In other words, in the case of a normal chatos, it doesn't matter what his financial status is. He always has to bring a kizba or a gedi. But in the case of a minchas chote, we have what's called a korban olev yored, which means that the nature of his korban is a reflection of his financial situation. If he can afford a kizba or a gedi, that's what he has to bring as a chatos. However, if he's an ani, a regular poor person, then he brings shnei torim, shnei bnei yom. But if, on the other hand, he's an ani sheba ani, he is so destitute, he can't even afford to pay for two birds, then he brings a minchas chote for those three chatoim that we mentioned earlier, for any of those three. Now, Rachmana Amar, the Torah says with regard to a minchas chote, lo yosim oleh shemen v'litin oleh levona. So why are you telling me that minchas sotah is the only mincha where you don't add shemen or levona? That's not true. In minchas chote, if they add shemen or levona, they violate this lav lo yosim. They get malchus for that. So Gemara answers, Hachinami kol hamenachos tu'uno shemen u'levono bos menachitin ubos soles. So that all menachos require shemen and levona, and they come from fine flour. Minchas chote afal pisha eina tu'uno shemen u'levona. Okay, fine, but ba menachitin uba solis. It has to come from wheat and sifted flour. Now we have two other menachos, which are kind of exceptional. We have the minchas ha'omer and the minchas sotah. So minchas ha'omer, afal pishi ba minas sa'orim. So it's not like any other minchas chote, which comes minachita, but it comes from barley, is tuna shemen ulevonu ba geresh. It's similar to a regular mincha in the fact that it requires shemen ulevona. And not only that, the barley itself has to be geres. Geres means sifted flour. Now we get to the third level of minchas sotah. V'zo eina tuna lo shemen lo levona ba minasona ba kemach. So it's got all three negatives. Number one, it doesn't have shemen or levona, and in that sense, it's similar to a minchas chote. On the other hand, it's ba kemach and minasa orim. So the fact that it's minasa orim makes it similar to a minchas ha'omer, but in contrast to the minchas ha'omer, which comes geres, here it's kemach. Kemach means meal, M-E-A-L. It's not sifted flour. So there are three requirements. There's shemen ulevona, there's chita, and there's solas. Now, if we leave out for a moment a minchas sotah, and we're left with minchas chote and minchas haomer, they require two out of the three requirements. In the case of the minchas chote, although you don't require shemen ulevona, but you need chita and you need solas. In the case of the omer, you require shemen ulevona, and like the minchas chote, it's made of fine flour geres, but it's made of barley, as opposed to the minchas chote, which is made of wheat. And as we said before, in the case of minchas sotah, it's barley. It's not geres, but rather it's kemach, and there's no shemen or levona. So it's missing all three requirements. Tanya, we learned to the Brayso of Reb Shimon. B'dinu shetei minchas chote tu'una shemen v'levona. Really, in truth, the minchas chote should have shemen ulevona, like any other mincha, except minchas sotah. However, why did the Torah exclude shemen ulevona in the case of minchas chote? Shelo yeh chote niskar. Right? If you require shemen ulevona, then second. Like shemen ulevona would jack up the price. One second. What does it mean? Shelo yehei chote niskar. I don't understand. You're making it cheaper. It's less expensive because you're subtracting the shemen ulevona. So why is it making it less expensive? One second. I don't get the mathematics here. If you have anything in your commentary, please share it with me. So we're making the minchas chote cheaper. That's other minchas are more costly. Rashi says, "Shelo yeh chote niskar lahakil b'minchaso yoser mishar menachos." So why is lahakil b'minchaso shelo yehei chote niskar? I got stuck here. Where's shelo yehei chote niskar here? Rashi says lahakil b'minchaso.
Yeah, he gets away with a cheaper was a cheaper mincha.
Right. So, Omer Rab Shimon Bidin. Okay, so I that's where I messed up in my logic with the negative and the positive. Bidin means Adarabba. There's more of a push to require Shemen Ulevon. Right? So just 1 second. Yeah, so I read it as Ella Shalo Yehei. I added a word Ella. This is not Ella. This is the Havamina. This is the Bidin. And the Havamina would have said, Adarabba, let's make it more expensive so he doesn't get off cheap. He doesn't deserve to be a Chote Niska. Oh, sorry. So now why is he getting away with the cheap carbon? That we don't want to beautify his carbon. So in other words, basically, Rab Shimon is pointing out that there is a tug of war here and a conflict. In one direction, we should say, you know what? Every other mincha requires shemen ulevona. You're going to have to pay for that. He should also have to pay for that. We don't want to let him off the... But on the other hand, we don't want his mincha to be a karba mahuda. And therefore, to contrast it with other minachos, we subtract the shemen ulevona. Vait. Ubedinu shetei chatas chelev to una nisachin. Okay, so we have chelev, which is an isur kares, and if he ate chelev b'shogeg, then he's chayav a chatas chelev. And Rabbi Shimon says that logically, it should be accompanied by nisachin. It means that a carbon chata should be no different than a carbon ola or a carbon shlamim. We'll leave out asham then. And why? Because he ate chelef, so he's a chote. And lo yeh chote niskar. Right? If you're going to tell me he doesn't have to pay for nisachim and he gets away cheap, whereas every other carbon requires nisachim, then he's a chote niskar. He's profiting from his sin. Oh, mipnei ma eina te'una. So why do we let him profit by alleviating him of the financial expense of paying for what? For nisachim. Shloyei karbon mahudar. We don't want to beautify his carbon chatos by accompanying it with nisachim. Right? Yayin is always considered a mahuda. These are not chatos that are brought for sin, but rather for tara. So when a mitzorah completes his process of purification, it has to bring many karbanos, one of which is called a chatos, another of which is called an asham. And since these are not coming for a chet, therefore they require nisach. In fact, the Gemara Eini, is that true that a mitzorah is not bringing a chatos for a chet? V'omer Rab Shmuel, v'arnachman Rabbi Yonasan, al shiva dvarim negoyim boim. So we have a list of 7 sins: lashon hara, and shvichas damim, and shvuas sheker, and gili arayos, and gaiva, and oshek or gneva. And also the Gemara in Erechim Daf Tezayin says stinginess. All of these 7 violations require will generate, when they're violated, will generate afflictions, meaning will generate negoin. So we see that he needs an atonement, a kapara for a sin. So the Gemara answers Hasam min nigei hudi chapila. Once he suffered the humiliation of tzaras, and he's, sent michutz lamachd, etc., then he already has atoned for his sins. So why is he bringing a carbon? Achatos. Ki maisi karba lesh teruye bekachim udekamais. This is part of his process of tara. He's a mechusar kapara. Elamiyatu, the Gemara says, chatos nazir tehei teuna nisachim, just like you established that a chatas mitzora requires nisachim because it's ain't obal achet. He already has kapara. What about the case of a nazir? Nazir at the end of regular naziris, he did not contract tumah. Nevertheless, he has to bring a chatas. So this is going to be the famous Rabbi Elazar HaKapar that we studied in Masechet Nazir. And Nazir nami chotehu, the pasuk says chot al nafsho, al nefesh. And Rabbi Elazar HaKapar says that he was Nazir atzmo min hayayin, and that itself is not the derech HaTorah. The Torah is the Torah's chaim, and should know how to sanctify and drink wine properly. Rabbi Elazar Omer kishem, right? Her actions are like that of an animal, and therefore her korban minchas sotah is very similar to a food of animals, etc., made of barley. Tanya Omer Lem, Rabbi Gamliel, Chacham Rabbi Gamliel was boasting about his insight, and he said Sofrim. He addresses the Chazal as Sofrim. He nichuli v'drashena kimin chomer. Literally, it's like a jewel. Chomer is a jewel. If you let me, I will expound my presentation like a jewel. Rashi says the word chomer refers to the shirts they had at the neck, two sides of the shirt that they attached on each side a golden button. But anyway, this is the precious nature of Rav Gamliel's drasha.